Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Through the Glass Columns, your weekly Wheel of Time read-along podcast in which Greg says something while he shouldn't really be saying something and I have to edit it out, but I won't because it's funnier if I don't. And I am joined by Greg, who thought he had another second to say something. Greg, how's it going?
I don't know. I stand by it. On my countdown, I had another second, so only the edit will tell who is correct. I'm very good, Tylor. I'm excited to be reading a little Path of Daggers and to be discussing it. For whatever reason, I have ended up reading like 5 books at one time. And the morning I sat down to read this, I actually passed a little bit through all 5 books within like 2 hours. And I was like, this is just living a nightmare/dream. But on off topic, I will say I finished The Way of Kings and I thought it was excellent. So I'm more excited for the Sanderson component of these. And while Sanderson is right now a really big name in fantasy, it's striking to me that all the books say, like, from the writer who finished The Wheel of Time. And so all the blurbs were like, this could be the next Wheel of Time. So it's
honestly
living up
one
to
of
it.
the weeks I'm kind of looking forward to is when we will probably spend a full week on Brandon Sanderson's intro to the first book that he wrote about how he got involved with the Wheel of Time. And it's really interesting if you know his work. So I'm excited for you to now have that context. That being said, that's probably like 2.5 years from now. So strap in, y'all. There's a lot more Wheel of Time before Brandon Sanderson takes over. This week, we're going to be talking about 2 chapters of the Path of Daggers. That is chapter 20, Into Andor, and chapter 21, Answering the Summons. And I said this before we started recording, and I will say it again now. Greg, I've said before on this podcast, don't say the word slog. Welcome to the slog, buddy. This book is just a lot of check-ins with characters and then moving on to other characters. How are you feeling at this point in the book?
Well, yeah, I had my theory last week that we would be kind of nesting doll our way back out of the middle, which didn't work already because it wasn't it's not literal. Yeah. We might just do another round as well, but I think that means it's not Russian dolls. It's or nesting dolls. It's something else. Having said that, when I read this a few days ago with all my other books, I didn't remember any feelings about this, right? It just kind of felt like I got some pages down and, we are increasingly close to the end of the book, right? I'm just double checking mine. It's
a couple hundred more pages.
175 or so, I think, is about where I'm at. Yep. 170. So, it feels like we should be getting that pickup, I don't know, down the roller coaster hill, powder keg blowing up, whatever of our old tried and true metaphors we want to use. And this week was certainly not it, but we'll see if maybe next week is.
Yeah, I think this is an odd week in some ways because we do split perspectives. We have 2 different characters in our 2 different chapters, and also we're kind of right, as you're saying, in the middle of the book. And Robert Jordan always tends to have a little lull in the middle, so this is it, although we've kind of been lulling for 10 chapters or so. I think that the one challenge I have with addressing these 2 chapters kind of generally is that they are a little bit different. And so unless you have any very specific thoughts, I kind of just want to dive straight into the summary. Any last thoughts on the general contrast before we get into it?
No.
Chapter 20, Into Andor. Thanks for all of that help, Greg. It's going to be a 5-minute podcast. Elayne is hopeful as she is healed after the explosion around the gateway. Lan mistakes Brigitte as Kandori and praises her strength. And then once they arrive at the manor, everyone seems to be upset about being inland if you're a sea folk, or on the run if you are one of the kin. Adelias and Vandine apparently intend to question Ispan again, and Elayne relaxes in the manor with Avienda and Brigitte as the night goes on. They are 4 to a bed and lucky for it with the number of people who were in the manor house, and the next morning they set off for Camelin. Elayne worries that a rival for the crown will spot her and then someone will try to kidnap her, and the nobles in her camp seem to have a number of concerns about the way that they're traveling. Rienne says that the nobles can leave if they wish, but they will be able to keep nothing, and she threatens them with punishments for not doing their chores, and they immediately snap into line. Elayne asks about the standing of House Drakond in villages and learned that basically all of the goodwill that had been built up was was thrown away in the last several years when her mother was under compulsion. We also learn that Dylan seems to be the favorite for the crown, but not even the individuals seem to know that or seem to think that she has a firm control of it. They do seem to think there will be a succession. Many of the people also seem to assume that Elayne and obviously Morgaze are dead. The Seafolk and the Kin have tensions on their travels, and Van Dien reports that Ispan is only giving the names of dead or compromised Black Aja and is not giving any new info. Lan and Nynaeve seem to have problems of their own because of their wedding vows, which we learn require that Lan lead in private because Nynaeve leads in public. Nynaeve seems tense, and Elayne and Brigitte find more Terangriel, but Elaine's attempt to study them goes very poorly. We learn at one point that a rod that Elayne channels into causes her to lose most of a day, and something embarrassing happens, but we don't entirely learn what it was. Once the snows begin, they begin to worry about being able to afford warm clothing, but then Avienda produces a bag of gemstones, and the Seafolk seem impressed by the town's negotiating, and Avienda says that the only reason she has the gemstones is because Rand tricked her. The Seafolk then demand the Bowl of the Winds now that the weather has changed, and Renail specifically demands that Aes Sedai teach her, as was required with the bargain with Nynaeve and Elayne, and once one of the Aes Sedai volunteers, the Seafolk require constant obedience and treat them more or less as someone below everyone else in the group. At this point, the Kin take this as a sign to stop deferring to the Aes Sedai because they see that the Seafolk no longer do so, and this creates tensions of its own. Elayne and Nynaeve prepare to go to Teleron Riod, nervous about meeting Egwene because the last time they saw her, Egwene yelled at them for the deal they made with the Seafolk, and we also learn that there were calls potentially for a penance, but Egwene was able to be talked out of that. Eventually, they arrive for their meeting to a message that has been carved into the wall. Stay in Caemlyn, keep silent. Elayne leaves a 15, her estimate of the number of days it will take to arrive in Caemlyn, and Nynaeve worries about Egwene's plans. Elayne apparently has pranked Nynaeve, she pranks Nynaeve by clapping, making her think that Egwene is there, and then the next morning, Nynaeve gets back at Elayne by waking her up with an icicle. 3 days later, the first explosion came. And if you've read the second chapter, you know we don't get to know what that means. So what did we think about Into Andor?
I mean, you just said way more stuff than I had remembered or written down. And I mean, I will say kind of the general feeling I had is that it was like, hey, you know all those problems that were on the other side of the gate? They're on this side of the gate too. Yep. And then we walk.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. And this is, I think, really indicative of my struggles with the Path of Daggers. It's not that nothing happens, right? These characters have already had a big, exciting moment with going through the gateway and the Shan-Chan and the explosion, but then the follow-up to it isn't, oh, cool, what do we do about this explosion? It's not, how are we going to manage the new politics of the Shan-Chan being here? It's, let's walk for some weeks, and people are going to be grumpy about walking. And there's nothing wrong with the big moments in this book, but it feels like we're following up like an exciting Rand moment with just like him sitting in a camp. And this is maybe the second or third time we've kind of had like good and then nothing. And it's kind of getting draining to have the fun early and then nothing after, is what I'm feeling about this plot right now.
Yeah, and yes, ending that, I will say, that it struck me that this felt a lot like Eye of the World, because we're on a similar part of the map, and they're just getting from point A to point B and just traveling through, and you get the same kind of, oh, there's these kind of rumors and these kind of rumors, but we just keep walking, so there's not a lot that seems to stick to them.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. So what I want to do then is just kind of go through the little moments that I think mostly we're going to have like a couple sentences to talk about, but I think all of these add together to a type of chapter that I think is oddly common in fantasy, right? Like, I think all the way back to the Lord of the Rings, like the walk down the road chapter is a thing that kind of needs to happen. And it's something that normally I think Robert Jordan does more effectively than this. Let's dive into the details. I'm done saying this chapter is bad. There's some fun stuff in here. First, I want to talk about Brigitte and Lan. Because Lan sees Brigitte's clothing, immediately assumes that she is from the Borderlands, and Brigitte has a very odd reaction to that. She seems like proud of it a little bit. She seems to like take the hint and lean into the idea that she's from Kandor, but it also creates like an anxiety in her, it seems like. She's really worried that Lan will think she's Kandori and she won't know something about Kandor. So what are your thoughts on Brigitte kind of finding identity in a way that I really wasn't expecting?
I mean, I think I read that set of emotions you just articulated as like the honor of a knight, right? Like that it bothers her to be dishonest, even though it's kind of a little harmless lie. This is her misrepresenting herself, and then, so being caught in the lie, her fear would be because, it's awkward, but also because it's potentially about honor, right? And that would dishonor her.
And I honestly think this scene is a little bit indicative of why I struggle with this chapter, is because I love this scene, because it's about Brigitte. And I love a couple of the other scenes I'll highlight because they're about Aviendha or about Elayne, but the 2/3 of the chapter that we're about to talk about the sea folk, doesn't do anything for me, right? The sea folk and the kin just aren't memorable enough in this chapter. And there's a bunch of like little details here, and I think what I take away from it is like the sea folk are pushing people around because of the agreement, and the kin aren't putting up with crap anymore. But that's kind of my summary.
I mean, I think I would even stretch it a little further that Elayne is a dull center. Not that she's always a dull character, but to have this be from her perspective, it's like, okay, she's the one kind of driving them, and I think she'll have great plot. Now it sounds like I'm using euphemisms, but I think events will center around her when they get to the throne, and it will be excellent. But at this moment, her job is just to kind of keep these people together. And then you're like, oh, but that person's really interesting, and that person's like a long dead hero who's become alive again, and
Earlier
a duty-bound man.
Earlier you said this book was sounding like the Eye of the World, and boy are you describing the Eye of the World, right? In that book, we were stuck in Boring Man Rand's head for 400 pages, wondering what all the cool characters were thinking. And you're right, Elayne is a great character, but not in this chapter. I kind of wish we were in anyone else's head. That's a great point.
And I mean, I think especially when it comes to Lan, Aviendha, and I guess I would put Brigitte in this,
or Nynaeve. I'm not sure which one you're thinking.
Brigitte, but not Brigitte's never had the center, but like Lan and Aviendha have been at the center, and they've been great. And both of them have now spent seemingly 2 books just kind of on the edges or the periphery. I know Lan didn't really show up till the end of the last one, but it's like these are compelling characters. I want to see them do stuff.
And I'm willing to take that transition because it's exactly where I wanted to go next, right? Like, Lan is such an interesting character who only gets 2 moments, and one of them is just like, hey, Brigitte, you're cool. And the other moment is, like, sneaking off into a haystack so that he can apparently, like, do weird domineering things with Nynaeve. I don't even know what to make of this marriage vow stuff. But you're right, it's such a good character to give nothing in this chapter. Yeah. And it's I don't know what to do with, hey, Lan's in charge in the bedroom. Like, I have nothing to say about that.
I mean, sounds like a good time. And it's like a cliche to have one of your cool characters like get married and then be boring, right? Like every sitcom ever, right? And so I feel like Lan and I'm gonna go Jim and Pam. I think Nynaeve and Lan have become the Jim and Pam, where it's like, will they, won't they? Oh, they will. Who cares? Like, it's over.
I think that's right. I think both of those characters, the longing was a big part of what made them interesting, and that ain't there anymore. So it's kind of curious to see where they go next. Because you're right, they kind of feel like hangers-on. Sorry.
When will a sound guy try to seduce Nynaeve is what I'm asking. But go on.
I mean, if the answer is season 8, we're about there. So you're not... I think then the only other thing I have here is... Well, a couple things. Number 1 is news of the kingdom. Most notably, I just need to put the word Dylan in your head. Dylan. That is not one of the rivals that that Egwene had met in the previous couple chapters, but it is the person that the common people seem to think is most likely to take the throne, assuming that Elayne is dead, which is apparently what most of them are assuming.
And I assume... Oh.
That's my dog. Let me mute.
Perrin's plot has now begun. I assume you're mentioning that name Dylan with such frequency and intensity, both to get it in my memory, but also because this is not somebody we've met before. This is a new character that we're just hearing rumors of.
That is correct. I think Morghese has maybe mentioned her a couple of times. She was one of the nobles who originally was in Morghese's camp, and Morghese sent away when she was under compulsion. But I think that's the only reference that we've had to that character.
Okay.
Last thing that I have in my notes, other than an explosion that I'm going to ask you what it is Elayne loses a day in apparently a way that is so weird that no one will tell her and so funny that they can't stop laughing about it. And I need you to tell me what you think happened to Elayne during that time.
I mean, for whatever reason, it came to mind that like you would be sitting there telling your secrets or bearing your soul, right? Like she's just, in some kind of trance and telling all of her deepest secrets to the world. And so they're all laughing because they know her secrets, but they're too kind to like let her, tell her she did that.
This was an excellent version of psychoanalysis. We all know that Greg has deep, dark secrets. Let's see if we can find them out in the next 2.5 years of this podcast. The last note I have here is that this chapter builds to a really fun, exciting sentence, and then you read the beginning of the next chapter, and we leave the plot line. So 3 days later, the explosion started. Hey, Greg, what are we anticipating? Literal explosions, political explosions? What do you think happens the next time we pop in with Elayne and Nynaeve?
Oh, well, I went literal explosions because that's what we left, right? Like that if the Shan-Chan are on their trail in quotation marks, I don't think they literally passed through the gate, but it felt like we've got a war coming to this plot line.
Excellent. Something is going to explode the next time we come back with Elayne and Nynaeve. We might be able to check that prediction in this book. I honestly can't remember. There's only 5 weeks left. Let's then, unless you have any final thoughts on Into Andor, completely switch gears and jump into Chapter 21, Answering the Summons. Storm's royal Ilion and Ashaman arrive, led by Charl Gedwyn. Gedwyn says he can't find anyone in the rain and wonders why so many Ashaman are needed when they're only fighting a relatively small army. Rand almost kills Gedwyn when he channels because he didn't realize he was going to do so. Lews Therin apparently wants Rand to kill all of the Ashaman, and Rand has also started seeing another face in his mind in addition to Lews Therin, which he thinks that face is familiar, but not one that he specifically recognizes. Rand then says he can't go mad yet, and Lews Therin wonders, when can I go mad? Wiraman then approaches and expresses concern for Rand's safety. Rand responds sarcastically and insists that he resists the idea that he needs more bodyguards. At this point, he says that they are headed into the city, and Rand then channels a gateway himself, and the soldiers divide into their separate camps once they arrive. Rand thinks that the nobles are too stupid to run the camp on their own, and he needs to keep them under his close watch. We also learn that most of Bren's men have actually come onto Rand's side and have not decided to continue to be in rebellion. The Ashaman keep a simple camp that is apparently tended with the power, and they don't generally have tents. They simply use the power to keep themselves dry. Dashiva approaches Roshade and Gedwyn, who seem to be in charge of the group of Ashaman, but he seems to be immediately rebuffed. Rand thinks of his problems, and he more or less lists them for us. They are the Sea Folk, Kadzuan, the Rebellions, Mat and Elayne in Shan-Chan territory, and the possibility of cleansing Saidin, which seems to terrify Lews Therin. Narishma then arrives with a bundle, which Rand takes and threatens to kill Narishma if he tells anyone about it. Lews Therin wants him to kill the whole world regardless. The next morning, the nobles observe Rand's legion men, the new foot soldiers who have joined his cause, and they seem doubtful about their abilities, and Rand, with the bundle, says that they are leaving. They travel to the Silver Road, which Rand thinks is defensible, and then they wait. The Ashaman are apparently searching somewhere, and the storms are slowing their search. As they wait, the nobles begin to get restless, especially as Rand starts to gather more and more of the nobles who he thinks of as only partially in his camp or that he needs to keep under his watchful eye. Eventually, he brings in Davram Bashir, and Bashir asks why Rand is doing this and asks him to explain his plan. Rand says that if anyone needs to die in a battle, it should be the ones that he trusts the least, and Bashir says that this plan, someone will die for it, and he hopes that it isn't them. So, another setup chapter, but I think a more exciting one. What did you think of answering the summons?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a tease, right? Like it's the plotting and it's the setup for something bigger. And oh my gosh, it's going to be dangerous. Don't you worry. I thought the most tantalizing clue was he keeps talking about a city, and they're like, I wonder which of these two nearby cities he's talking about. I'm like, okay, he's definitely talking like the other side of the map. Like he's gonna.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, and I can't remember if it's character. I think it's characters who don't know he can travel or whatever.
Okay.
But like I'm like and based on his I mean the other key moment is that he ranks his problems like I try to rank the problems in this. So and he puts Sean Chan at the top, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
So to me that means I don't think we're going to the tip of Faum, as it were, but I do suspect we're gonna jump deep into Sean Chan territory because Rand seems like a cut the head off the snake type of guy.
Totally. Yeah, and this is the question, right? This is a chapter that kind of leaves us with a bunch of dangling questions, right? We don't know what Rand's plan is. We don't know what this package that Narishma has gathered is. We don't know why Rand needs so many Ashaman when they say it's overkill. There's a lot of kind of why that we're left to wonder. And so really what I've got in this chapter is a list of breadcrumbs that I can't say much about because I know what Rand's plan is. And so I just kind of want to get the ideas in your and the listeners' heads, and hopefully over the next couple weeks we'll kind of pay off all of these seeds that I'm planting.
Weeks? That means it's not next week. Boo, boo, Tylor, boo.
I'm just assuming Robert Jordan doesn't do anything in 1 week. That just seems like a safe bet. So the first thing that I want to note here is that Rand's plans are actually being dramatically upended by the use of the Bowl of the Winds. Multiple times in this chapter, Rand is talking about how badly the weather is kind of stopping him from being able to scout, how much it's limiting visibility in the places that he wants to be using, and he even seems to deliberately camp far away from the area where the battle is happening because it's out of the worst of the storms. And so that kind of interactivity between the plots is the best thing that I've got to say for this book right now. What do we think about this?
Yeah, I think we mentioned that a week or two ago as well, that it's really helpful that you have this kind of swath. So I probably shared this on air, or at least with you personally. So, this fall, there was the big Ken Burns Revolution documentary, and I really enjoyed that, and I watched it. And then like a month later, there was The Testament of Anne Lee came out in theaters, a movie we both enjoyed. And there's an eclipse in Anne Lee. And it's the same eclipse that's in the Revolution documentary because they're, happening at the same. And like my Marvel brain activated. I'm like, oh my God, these plot lines are lining up. Like who will cross over? Is George Washington coming to Anne Lee? So it is kind of that same feeling where you're like the big earth shattering use of the bowl. I guess not literally earth shattering, we should say, since some things shattered the earth in this universe. But it's really helpful to sync up all of those. The other funny analogy I'll give is, you sometimes hear on professional podcasts, unlike this one, where they're recording at their own houses or on their own machines. So they all clap to like align everything. Yeah. So this feels like a clap where it's like, okay, so you can figure out how these all line up. And I think in a book like this where you jump around, you kind of naturally assume you're still running roughly chronologically, which you are, but it does help to kind of really sync those up.
That is an incredible point. It's really accurate. I don't want to sound like I'm dismissing it. But in 2 books, remember you said that because Robert Jordan's going to screw up that exact same thing really badly. Everyone who's read the books is like, oh, Greg, yeah, the clap is a good metaphor, but not in this series.
So, I mean... I think it's also important that Rand isn't totally in control. He's not omnipotent. I guess my head says I should say yet, but he's not omnipotent and he can't control it all. And we've talked before about how he leaves these little like eddies in his wake, and he's now got some very powerful ones out there in the world changing things. I mean, his actions have completely changed Egwene, Nynaeve, and Elayne, and they've gone off and they've done this major thing, which he at least was not anticipating, so it screwed up his plans.
I'll be honest, I jumped from the very beginning of the chapter until Luz Theron wondering when Rand gets to go mad, which is a very funny question from the voice in someone's head. What are your thoughts on Luz Theron? Because I think the last time we were in Rand's head, he was begging for Luz Theron to talk to him, was getting nothing, and then we ended the chapter with like the most ironic laugh of Rand having Luz Theron back. And now that he's back, it seems like his message is kill, 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 murder, murder, murder. And that's worrisome.
Although to that, I will add, don't cleanse the power. Don't cleanse the power, right? Like, and to me, this feels like Luz feels threatened, right? That like his continued existence relies on Rand going mad, right?
Pop quiz. Why is the Sidene tainted? Who did that?
The people. No,
Luz Theron did. The
Luz
original
Theron
Luz
did?
Theron 3,000 years ago. He tried to seal the Dark One away, and he did it imperfectly, allowing Sidene to be tainted. So it's literally the man who tainted Sidene warning Rand, don't untaint Sidene.
Well, and that's helpful, but also it's like, you know, in the pure voice in your head, if we don't think of him as a character, but like if you're going mad and there's something that could stop you from going mad, the voices would tell you not to do it, one would assume. I don't have any lived experience of said disabilities.
Right? Like, to some degree, we all have a voice in our head. And so the difference between sanity and not is whether that voice is giving good, rational advice, right? And don't do the thing that everyone was really excited about a couple of chapters ago is worrisome, right? So it's kind of an odd place to have Rand right now, where I feel like when Rand is in control of scenes, he feels more competent and more on top of things than I think I would have thought at any point prior. But in terms of how he's interacting with his madness, he is now making like really macabre when I'm gone jokes. He is listening and begging for advice from the voice in his head. He feels much further gone than he was. And to add on top of that, even though he has dozens of Ashaman around him, he's still doing all of his own channeling, which means he's presumably going slightly more mad every time he does so.
I don't think I'd remembered to be thinking of him as like, you know, the crack is in the rock and the water is getting in and it's pushing and pushing and pushing on his sanity. So that's helpful. But then I will say he doesn't totally feel out of control though, right? Like so much of this chapter is he's very rationally ordering his problems, making specific plans. And while, you know, there's some mystery here. I mean, well, you mentioned the mystery of whatever the guy brought him. I assumed it was another seal, right? He'd been collecting seals and doesn't want people to know it's seals. Oh, I can tell from your tone that you're not going to comment on that, but that's fine. That was where my head went immediately because he's been collecting and checking them and seeing what's going on. So, but it could be some kind of weapon or something for this plan, an item, then he doesn't want it to leak out. I'm not sure.
So the one additional piece of information we get is that Rand apparently told Narishma what to do in order to get to whatever this bundled item was. And the fun moment that I liked is Narishma says, "You didn't tell me everything." And Rand in his head goes, "Yes, I did. Wait, did I?" And so A, that's him losing it a little, but B, it implies that Rand knows the defenses of whatever this was better than most would, right? And so that very well could be one of the seals that he had, put away somewhere and he wanted to bring back to him. But the fact that it almost feels like Rand is the one who protected it is an odd clue here.
I shifted my camera so Tylor can see my Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade art, because that's what I immediately thought of is the penitent man, right? The dad writing in his journal all the tests, but not really telling the tests, right? Not having the actual information, just the vague clues or some such. So feels a little like that. Like he directed him to go solve some Indiana Jones temple stuff and didn't know all the puzzles.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I'll be honest, that is the end of my notes on big, interesting things in this chapter, right? I have a bunch of groups that I want to make sure we mention and make sure we're getting in our head. I have a couple of little moments, but if Rand is what we care about in this chapter, I think madness and control is a big part of what we should be thinking about here. And then the other piece you've alluded to a couple of times, I don't know if you have more to say about it, Rand ordering his problems, right? I think you're right to say the Shan-Chan are right at the top. That's probably what we deal with now. But he then provides kind of a litany of other things, and we're aware of all of them. But I was curious if there was anything you got out of that discussion other than just it's a list.
I mean, I mostly was like, he does what I do. But it's also really helpful because, I mean, it's helpful to hear what the character sets as his priorities, even though it would be folly to assume that's the correct order, right? That's not the universe's order. Star Wars fans make this mistake a lot. Like Obi-Wan thinks Luke is the chosen one, and then everybody's like, what's happening? It's like, no, he's just wrong, right? Like the character can be wrong and the universe still works or what have you. So it felt a little like that. I was tempted to say, okay, this must be the order we should consider these things, but no. I mean, the Shan-Chan feel like a problem with urgency, and so it only makes sense that they're at the top, even if they're not the existential threat that something like, you know, untainting Sidene would be, or you know, facing the Dark One. I thought the rebellions, just like as a group, it's like, well, that's like a lot of disparate small problems in very different locations, but did feel like that would feel small to Rand because these aren't real threats to him.
I do also want to note there is one thing that I think we had talked about a couple of weeks ago, as like we put a pin in it, like Rand will need to deal with this at some point, and it's not on Rand's list, and that's Mazrim Taim. Right? He's literally bringing in a bunch of Ashaman that he doesn't know that he can fully trust. And yet on his list of things to do is not deal with the Ashaman that I can't fully trust.
Well, and when I was thinking about this place he's going, the Black Tower came to mind, right? But I don't think that Mazrim is in such open rebellion now that now's the time to do that. So it's like it came up on my list of potentials, and I was like, no, I think it's really going to be, and I know I looked at the map at the time, but I don't remember any of it. But I was like, okay, where haven't we been over in that southwest part of the continent, and where might he jump to? I mean, we've been to Tanchico. We've been to Amador.
Most of the ground in that section. Actually.
Yeah. So somewhere in Terabon, or potentially we have gotten the clues from Tremalking, right? In the prologue, I believe. So,
yep.
But that doesn't. I'm not going to put money on that one. I'm not. Sorry, Poly Market. That's not where I'm putting my money.
Man, 1,000-to-1 odds are what you take, baby. I think then that I just want to make sure we get some names in your head, right? That's most of my goal for the rest of this. 3 Ashaman, right? We have the new one, Roshade, seems to be the most powerful of the Ashaman. I think they refer to him as a storm leader or something like that. The second, who is Roshade's second, is Gedwin, who we had met before. He was actually at Dumais Wells, and Rand basically immediately thought, like, this guy's a pompous jerk, and then he went away. The last name is Narishma. Narishma is he was originally a soldier who was brought in to Rand's group when he selected, I think it was Deshiva and like 4 or 5 soldiers and a number of dedicated. Narishma is now a full Ashaman, and Narishma at least seems to have Rand's trust, right? Whatever this is that Rand needed, Rand sent him to get it instead of going himself. And I don't know that I would have put Narishma as the number 1 on my most trusted Ashaman rankings, mostly because I'm not sure if we've heard his name more than twice before, but it's a name we should have in mind. Any thoughts on the Ashaman?
I would just say nothing specific to what you just said, but I would just say because of the Mazrim Taim, I'm just kind of suspicious of all of them. So I hear what you're saying, that Narishma maybe should be at least separated from the rest, but I'm like suspicious of what all of them are up to because I think Rand's going to be separated from them at some point.
No, totally. I have absolutely nothing to say about Illianer or Terran nobles. They don't like foot soldiers, whatever. I do want to point out, however, a couple of chapters ago, Rand was faced with this like charismatic leader of the rebels in Ilion. And the the rebel leader's argument was basically like, look, people who are supposedly aligned with the dragon are ravaging the farmland, and so I need assurances, right? I'm not going to leave without my weapons. And Rand said, you can keep your weapons, but only if you follow me. And in this chapter, we learn that not only did most of those rebels choose to follow Rand, but that Rand is now outfitting them specially, and they are now like the Dragon's Legion men or something like that. And so this, I think, is only notable because every time that Rand has had like a special group following him, something happens to them and they become important in some way. And so I think just keeping this idea of like the Legion men as a distinct force that was formed out of these rebels is kind of in the same way I'm saying like Narishma, like Legion men, Legion men, Legion men.
Okay. And what was the one from last chapter?
Those are now the Legion men. So those were originally Samael's forces, who Samael had led out of the city, and then when Rand killed Samael, they were basically rebels without a cause, and in the last chapter, Rand threatened them, like, either we're going to wipe you out or you're going to join our cause. And when they joined his cause, he made them the Legion men.
Cool.
Last thing I have in the chapter, Davram Bashir arrives and is like, Rand, what are you doing? And Rand's response is, well, if someone's going to die, it might as well be the people I don't like. And there is both logic in that, and it worries me about Rand's sanity, considering that we've kind of been judging him against the farm boy. And it makes me worried about what Bashir is worried about. Like, is this plan actually going to work, or is this a recipe for like an army that just loses battles? So we kind of end this chapter with this cliffhanger, right? We don't know what's in Narishma's package. We don't know whether the plan is going to work. We don't know where Rand is going. Lots of question marks. You don't need to speculate on all of those, but I would just love your thoughts on where you think this is going in the next 5 weeks. It seems like Rand is probably our focus for a decent chunk of the rest of this book, the way this is headed.
Yeah, I mean, I think it feels to me like the classic setup of he's actually a genius and he's going to win this battle, having sacrificed the right kind of sacrifice. Now, the sanity question intermingled with that is trickier to figure out. Where that comes from is like when everybody's like, oh, this is never going to work, then you know the hero is going to make it work. But the insanity piece feels a little harder to place within that. And then again, I was just saying I've been reading Brandon Sanderson, and so much of that Way of Kings book, it focuses on like the disposable parts of an army, right? And so this feels very much in line with where my head was at with those plot lines, where it's like, yeah, Rand sounds like he now has some people he just will get rid of and doesn't really care as a part of this. And I think there's a way in which that is good military strategy in some regards, but is also like a sign of madness that you don't put any value on some subset of human lives, which is usually a bad thing.
And at best, this is like a high risk, high reward strategy, right? Rand seems to be like, if you're going to roll the dice with the things you don't care about, but that's a real callous attitude. I think you're exactly right. Unless you have any deep thoughts about the parts of this chapter we haven't yet covered, I think it's time to basically say next week we got 2 chapters. There's chapter 22, Gathering Clouds, and chapter 23, Fog of War, Storm of Battle. And at least that second chapter makes it seem like something's going to blow up at some point. Which plots do you think we're in, and what do we think is happening next week? What are you looking forward to, Greg?
Well, I have to confess, I saw that we have a Dalmane for the chapter icon on 22. Sorry for listeners if that's a spoiler. So it feels to me like we're probably going to the Shan-Chan. So my question is Rand showing up with the Shan-Chan, or is this another little interlude? Because that second one sounds like when we learn of what Rand's plot was, but we shall see, or not. Maybe next time? Huh? Through the Glass Columns.